Welkom. U luistert naar Vrijheidradio.
Introduce you to him. Yeah, here we go. I accidentally started.
How dare you!
It was not my purpose. Yeah, this very special guest is Antony Sammeroff, and he is from the Scottish Libertarian Party. And you are the spokesperson on economics and environment.
For my sins, that is correct.
Yeah. Okay, welcome. And in a few minutes, Yoshi will also join the live stream. But yeah, first of all, just give us a small introduction about what you're doing and who you are.
Hi there, my name's Antony Sammeroff. I co-host the Scottish Liberty podcast, and also I have Be Yourself and Love It podcast, which is a personal development podcast. I got into studying economics maybe 10, 12, 14 years ago. I got really into it within the last 6 to 10 years, and I've been writing on economics issues as well as podcasting for 5 years maybe. And just general interest on liberty and things like that. I always thought that a lot of these topics are really interesting.
Okay, yeah.
More so than the ways that I saw them being written about. And recently I've just been studying Marx and comparing them and doing, I guess I just kind of think that these ideas are really interesting and should be accessible to more people.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that as well, mostly. First of all, I want to ask you, how's the Scottish Libertarian Party doing at this moment?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm always reminded of Walter Block, a famous libertarian, asking Murray Rothbard, how many libertarians do you think there are? And Rothbard was like, about 24. So I think the lucky thing, I felt very much like that we were at the 24 people stage of the movement in Scotland. But I hear that things are taking off and there's been a lot of new members joining over the last year.
Yeah, I think the corona crisis is also hitting Scotland very hard at this moment.
Yes, unfortunately, it seems that a lot of my countrymen are quite for the lockdowns. So even though the First Minister opened up a little bit, she's locked back down. Luckily, I'm in Florida at the moment, so my exposure to the Scottish lockdown is minimal compared to most people's.
You would expect that all these lockdowns would create more libertarians, but also in my country, you see people go the opposite. It's like they are in love with the people who are keeping them in lockdown.
Yes, it is like that. It seems that the more the government lockdown here, the more popular they become. It might have created some libertarians, but it seems that the stereotype that fear drives people to become compliant seems to be true. They're looking for their mum and dad to come and swoop in and protect them. And unfortunately, they're confusing the government with their mum and dad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Are there, you had also this independent movement because of Scotland was on the verge of becoming independent from the UK. How's that going?
Well, the vote took place a few years ago, and they failed to push through independence. The vote was 55% against to 45% in favour of. I think really it's just a matter of time, because the younger people are more in favour of independence than the older people are. So as the demographics switch, it's likely that Scotland will become an independent nation from the UK.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, let's talk about the about Marx and Mises. Can you describe in short what's the difference between the both of them? Although it's very obvious, but for the people who are not familiar with both.
Well, I mean, I don't know how possible it is to do it in short, but I guess they represent polar opposites, in that Mises is in favour of a full market, free market economy without restrictions, and Marx is for the complete abolition of the market. Now, not all Marxists are now for the complete abolition of the market, but it's clear if you read Marx that he wants the end of buying and selling, and he wants what he calls the anarchy of production, or at least what his collaborator Engels called the anarchy of production, which is in a free market, people just make decisions independently, and he sees this as unstable and just a silly idea to let people do these things independently. He wants the conscious control of production. He wants what they call production for use, not profit, not production for profit, but production for use. He thinks, oh, we should sit down and look at what people need, and then we should consciously plan the economy to produce that, what we discover that people need.
Marx is for a lot of people. People have this idea that if you are working for an employer, then you should choose Marxism because that's supposed to be better for you as an employer. But how is it in reality? Is it a bad idea for employees to follow Marxist ideas?
Well, I mean, I think it's probably bad for everyone to follow Marxist ideas, because what we've seen is that you can abolish the market, even in countries where they've tried to do this. They've had, like Lenin himself, had to institute the new economic policy because they were unable to consciously plan the entire society. You need the feedback mechanism of buying and selling to tell producers what needs to be produced in what measure. You know, even a baker knows roughly how much brown bread and white bread and croissants and cakes to make every day, because he's got the information of people coming in and out of the shop every day. But even him, with that information, will still have to throw away bags of one product one day, and he'll outsell another product another day. He'll run out, even though that product's in demand. So even with that local knowledge, people make mistakes. So just scale that up into an entire economy is completely impossible, because everyone has wants, needs, preferences, different levels of information that are changing all the time. And it's impossible to plan for the human heart. Sometimes it's even impossible to plan for our own heart, because we gain new information, we change our minds. So to try and do that across a whole economy is impossible. And Mises identified this in 1920 when he wrote a famous article called Economic Calculation in the Socialist Commonwealth, when he said that without prices in the means of production, the factories, the machines, land, natural resources, it's impossible to calculate what and how to produce. You know, if you've got a railway that needs to go from A to B, but there's a mountain range between A and B. How do you figure out whether you should go around the mountain, if you should go burrow through the mountain, or if you should find a path for the railway through the mountain range? The only way is by having prices to indicate which would be the most economic, like in terms of cost-benefit analysis. Prices and the means of production communicate how in need a resource like, say, iron is, because all of the producers are trying to get a hold of iron, and if the price goes too high, then some people will say, well, I'll just find something else to use it for. But those people who really need it, who really can't do without it, are likely to pay the higher price for it. And the same goes for a plot of land or any resource that might be required for production. And Marx could not conceive of this problem.
Yeah, I had to interrupt because Yoshi is coming in.
Excellent.
Yeah, and he raided the channel with a bunch of people. So we got some extra listeners. And he is... yeah, but you can continue now your sentence. Because,
well, I think I came to the end of that.
Okay, yeah.
Hi guys.
Hi, Yoshi.
Hello.
I just forwarded a couple of people to the conversation.
Yeah.
They come from my stream, and we had a little warm up. We have at the moment there's a race happening, but never mind about all of that. Let's. I thought that I could be a little bit of a moderator to the chat. Maybe somebody has something like that. Of course, you can also try my knowledge on your subject, but I am outclassed. I know that, so don't expect fireworks from me. But yeah, well, I'm curious. I already listened a little bit while I was live to what you were saying. So we had the introduction.
Yeah. Your camera is off, by the way.
But yeah, my camera is off. All right, let's do that. Yeah, I'm dressed up, just so you know. I hope you don't mind. I can take it all off. It's for my own show, but can you already see me?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So let's have a quick introduction of me then to you, because I just heard you are, but you don't know yet of me. I'm Yoshi Livo from Liberland, and I stream about cryptos, well, a couple of times per week. So I try to do it like that. And yeah, what to say? I live without a bank account since 2014 because I got in contact with Bitcoin quite early on, and I invested some of that with Liberland, and we're trying to build our own nation because we want to escape the European Union. So yeah, that's a little bit of my background.
We're glad you're here, Yoshi. And for the people who think, Johan, do you have a voice mod on? No, this is my natural voice now. I just lost it.
Oh yeah, but it is a little bit. You should put it a little louder on the stream because you are it's a very weak sound.
Okay. Maybe I have to turn on my. Wait a minute. Maybe you can. Yoshi can ask Antony some questions, and I put on my some software to pump up the volume.
All right. Well, let me ask a little bit broader question then about today's time, because that is what I do live in, or have some idea about. So, how do you fill your days today, and do you manage to get by, for example? How do you adjust to current moments?
Well, I'm a therapist, and fortunately I've had an online practice for practically the whole time that I've been a therapist. So I've been doing okay because I see people online, So from that respect, it's been pretty good, or like at least not bad. I also, I'm a writer, so I write from home. I'm a podcaster, so I podcast from home when I podcast. I've been relatively fortunate. So yeah, that's all I can say on that point. I mean, I miss being able to do the normal things that people enjoy, being able to do the same as everyone else misses them. But as far as work goes, things have been relatively okay.
Have you already been protesting any of the measures, or have you been? How have you been dealing with it?
I went to one lockdown protest out of curiosity, but it was rather a dull affair, so I didn't go to any more.
Yeah.
The earth was flat there or not?
The earth was flat.
That was a question of it. Was that the general consensus among the people?
No, there was no. It wasn't like that. I mean, the thing is, it was there was definitely some more extreme views where people were worried about New World Order stuff, and there was definitely people who are worried about vaccinations, particularly mandatory vaccinations. But I think largely, I mean, I don't know, where's the line between what is like normal, allowable skepticism and tinfoil hat wearing? It's in a different place for everyone. For some people, well, I mean, like, the thing is, skepticism towards the pharmaceutical industry can go too far, but it's also based on the fact that there's a lot of shit going on in the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, from from companies doing clinical trials and excluding results that don't suit their marketing schedule, to
great example,
to people who run journal. Like, I think one of the directors of the Lancet, I need to get the specific details, basically left in disgust, saying that the journal had basically become run by the advertisers. Whoever was running, they would not publish results that said this drug has got side effects or this drug is bad and things like that, because they'd go, well, that company advertises in our journal, so we don't want them to get mad at us and stop advertising in the journal. So until we actually sort the problems that exist in the pharmaceutical industry, you're not going to be surprised when people are like strongly against vaccinations or skeptical about this, that, and the other, because they're being given reason to be skeptical.
And the last example of what you just mentioned, what I remember is that or something around that time, there was this article in the Lancet about hydroxychloroquine that got retracted 2 weeks later, but all the institutions based on that article then stopped all their research because, the Lancet already wrote about it, right? And that's how they managed to steer it, and to push it.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much stuff about there's a great book called Overdosed America, and you can watch some of the videos with the author of that book on YouTube. He exposes a lot of bad science in medicine and explains why people might have reasons to be skeptical. Now, that doesn't mean that drugs don't save lives as well. It's just we're herded into taking extreme positions. Like, if you've got any concern about vaccinations at all, you're anti-vax, or they're all bad, or they're all good, or people feel like they need to mount a strident defense of pharmaceutical companies because they're reacting against the more fringe views like, oh, all medicine is poison and, we should just be, I don't know, taking cannabis oil or something like that. People are polarized into two extreme views, but the world is absolutely full of nuance.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, of course.
By the way,
It's always very difficult.
By the way, how do I sound now? Is it better?
I don't know, because I get an echo if I now listen, so I don't listen now live.
Okay, but
I
here in
only
the
hear
Skype, is it okay?
In the Skype we are okay, but it was on the stream you were a little bit weak.
How do I sound now? Do I sound
I'm
weird?
only listening to the Skype now, so I don't know.
Okay, but continue. Sorry.
Yeah, well, that was just my little question, because that's what I'm really, I fell asleep a little bit over the last 2 years, because I managed to cash in the last bull run of 2017 with Bitcoin, and then, well, I had the luxury of, not having to be on top of it. I was on top of it for 6 years, like with the Bitcoin, everything I wanted to see, and then when it hit, or when I managed to cash out in a good way, I wasn't paying attention to event 201, for example, that happened in October the year before. So let's say 14 months ago, something like that. So I wasn't paying attention at all, and then I got bored, so I sold some Bitcoins to buy all this studio equipment. And then when on the 3rd of March, I went live for the first time, and within 2 weeks, the entire world was upside down. So for me, the stream has influenced my year a lot, and I really had a lot from that, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, what can I do more? I have given up my nationality to go to Liberland, and I'm spreading that narrative on the internet, and you can call me misinformation, but it's my narrative, and my Bitcoins pay for it so far, so I'm doing okay, And yeah, I don't know what to say about it, but
yeah, I think that's the best we can hope for, is to start with ourselves and make sure that we're doing okay and trying to help the people around us, and take it from there, because a lot of people are kind of focusing on the world events as a distraction, because it's easier to have strong feelings about things that you can't control.
Oh, here we go. Wait a second.
Oh, the phone is ringing.
Now
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's easier to have concerns about things that are outside of your control than take responsibility for what is in your control. What I think about, for example, is people who are worried about, say, fluoride and chlorine in the water, which, there's reason to think it's harmful, but, they go out and eat at McDonald's or something like that. It's like, maybe you should start with what is in your control, stop eating, put the corn chips away, while you're like complaining on the internet about GMOs, while when you go to the supermarket, your basket is your basket is absolutely full of processed food that
yes.
that doesn't have the vitality that you need. So yes, I'm all for being careful about what we put in our food and water supply and air and things like that, but people really need to take control of what they can change first.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, it's a good comment, especially because, and that's something that I also already heard before you saw me. A lot of people just don't want the help. I mean, I tried it again last week here, and get these people to accept Bitcoin or other cryptos where I live now, and it's difficult, and it's very emotional. The money is so emotional for the people, and then they never want to admit that they are slaves for that money, because that's so painful. So they don't want to think about crypto, for example, that's what I started. And it's just, I try to help them a little bit and make a little video on explaining how to install a wallet or stuff like that. But It's difficult, man. It's difficult. People that don't want to be helped. That's why, although I don't like him, but I really hope that Trump is going to take that election, and then it's going to be a shockwave. I really can see how the story plays out in that way, So, but
actually, Antony is in the USA. Maybe you can tell us a bit with how do you experience the American elections around you?
Well, I mean, I actually only arrived here around the 23rd of November, so I didn't actually see the US elections play out. I would say that for myself, it's really hard to know what's going on, and even in America, because I'm staying here at my girlfriend's house. Sometimes we go out for dinner. We've gone out to a bar a couple of times, and people seem to be having fun. But without being able to go into people's houses and ask them, "Hey, what do you think about what's going wrong on right now?" The only thing is Facebook. You're getting your view of the world from Facebook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, try to find a couple of good Twitch streams, because that can also help. Right, but I know what you're saying. I do try to follow the mainstream media just a little bit, but I know the bullshit that they are saying, and I see it different. I don't believe it. So I don't know. I still give Trump a small chance.
Have you got also some contacts with the American Libertarian Party, and do you know a little bit how they are doing?
I don't, I mean, I went to a Libertarian Party meetup a couple of weeks ago, and it seems like everyone there is pretty skeptical on the lockdowns, and, aware of the fact that these are seeming to cause more harm than good. But it's really hard. I don't know what the party as a whole thinks or anything like that. We're all pretty atomized at the moment. Even at the best of times, even when society was open and you could go to bars and restaurants and clubs and everything, cafes, you still live in a bubble of your peers and things like that. Yeah, you might have a casual conversation with someone here and there, but you really, even so, it's going to be a biased sample depending on when you go to. It's really hard to know what the public as a whole thinks on anything.
Yeah, but in a way, you have to choose a side. In a way, we are forced to really take consciously what's happening now, because it's stretched out for so long, and this is discussion, and so I don't know. We will see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
We will see.
Yeah, but let's go back to the explanation of what cultural Marxism is.
Okay, well,
don't know it.
Okay, it's not center of the bullseye in terms of my expertise, so we might just get. I know more about orthodox Marxism, but essentially what happened was Marx made a bunch of predictions that were wrong. One of them was that capitalism would lead to the progressive immiseration of the workers. In other words, the working class would get more and more poor, more and more impoverished under capitalism, as the strive for profit drove wages down. That didn't materialize. Even in Marx's own lifetime, he saw living standards increase. So he himself repudiated that claim towards the end of his life. The thing is, Marx's theory of history said that societies go through stages, and when a stage comes to its full development, it requires revolution in order to bring about the next stage of society. So feudal societies were no longer tenable at a certain stage in history, which caused bourgeois revolutions like the French Revolution and the American Revolution, which were revolutions to make the world safe for capitalism. And he thought that this would happen in the most industrialized societies the communist revolution would happen in the most industrialized societies because those were the most advanced capitalist societies. That's another prediction of his that was wrong, because of course we know communism happened first in Russia. which was not one of the most industrialized societies like Germany or Britain or the USA. So the Marxists wanted to have some explanation for why the working class were not seeing that they were being exploited by capitalists in advanced societies, and why they were not overthrowing the repression of the capitalists. And basically the cultural Marxists, people like the Frankfurt School, which was a research institute in Germany, which then was moved to America because of the Nazis. A lot of them were Jewish, and if they weren't persecuted for being Jewish, they would have been persecuted for being communists. They had to flee Germany, and they set up in the USA, and they basically were trying to understand why revolution had not happened in Western countries, because they saw, like Marx, they saw capitalism as alienating to the worker, that they wanted a system which led to the fully fledged development of the human individual, or, that's what they believed that this socialist communist utopia would be. They thought people's lives in capitalist societies were ruled by work, and that products ruled people, and the things you own you, and all this stuff. So they said, they basically thought that the workers had been assimilated into the capitalist system, and that had happened through various means. One was cheap commodities. They were given these cheap goods and services, bread and circuses. So, they're happy with their little gadgets and toys, their phonograph record player and their crappy pop music, and it's keeping them mesmerized and hypnotized into the system. And they wanted a alternative strategy for overthrowing capitalism, and since the workers had been assimilated into the system, they said the only way to do that is through cultural means. We need to change the culture, and they set about doing that in several means. And the most flagrant manifestations of that now are like identity politics, which in a way is
Sorry, what?
identity politics.
Identity politics. Sorry,
now,
I misheard you.
My friend and consultant, I consult sometimes for his views on Marx, Michael Rechtenwald, he says it's important to know that the cultural Marxists stood Marx on his head, but it was still Marx that they stood on his head, because while identity politics is really really incompatible with orthodox Marxism, because Marxism says people are in classes, your working class, bourgeois class, and your affiliation is class-based, not based on your race or sex or your sexual identity or your national identity. You are a worker. You're part of the international class, the working class, which has no nation. So that's orthodox Marxism. Your nationality is not important. Your identity is not important. It's your class affiliation. Even though that seems to be even though it seems to be a departure from Marx, it's still Marx they're putting on their head, because it still has the class antagonistic element of it. Now you're classed by your sex. If you're a male, you're a white male, you've got white male privilege, which that puts you in a different class, an antagonistic class to, say, a black woman, for example. So that's the very interesting thing about cultural Marxism, whereas on one hand it's a departure from orthodox Marxism, it's also it also incorporates elements of Marx. In fact, in a way, it's a sort of proof of Marxian thinking. If you'd say that Marx took from Hegel this idea that society changes dialectically, so you have one force pushing in one direction, and you have another force pushing in the opposite direction, and what you end up is they synthesize together and produce a new thing, which incorporates elements of them both. So a kind of cultural Marxism incorporates elements of Marxism but changes other ones.
Well, we do see a lot of pushing happening from the Marxist side of society today, is what I believe. I don't know if you're familiar with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations.
I'd be interested to hear you commenting on them.
Well, the thing is, it's a lot to say in one thing, but that sounds to me exactly like what you have just described to me here. The change of and then your conclusion in the end, of how I took it, is there are two sides pushing, and they end up somewhere, depending on how hard they push, somewhere else, And so if I see all this pushing happening today, and for example, everybody being put on Corona aid and stuff like that, basically basic income has arrived, where is this gonna end? How are we gonna try and, because I've also heard you say that he was wrong, Mr. Marx, right? So I'm just playing, so how should we deviate from or how should we push back against? Well, it's a very strong push that I see happening. So as a Liberlander, I would like to. Yeah, well, it's one of the ways to push back, but maybe you have a different, better one. How to open the eyes of these, because I have the feeling like a lot of them don't really know that it is Marxist what they are supporting at the moment, and they just, it feels right because they have always had this feeling for whatever reason, because they watch too much television probably, but like they are, less than somebody else because on television every hero is white. I've never seen a black James Bond, so let's be fair about it. And but how to break that trance almost, or that's
Well, I think you're hitting on something important, which is that this is a psychological phenomenon. You said these people feel like they're being screwed, or I think that we've got a problem in that our education system doesn't prepare people for participation. I say that quickly. Prepare people for participation in a market economy. If you had a schooling system that took people in, identified their skills, and helped support them in learning skills, then by the time they're adults, by the time they're ready to enter the workplace, in fact, the education system should give people an opportunity to learn 3, 4, 5 skills, at least to the point where they're not rubbish at them. Because learning a skill isn't just like, say you go to woodwork classes and you learn to make a table. You don't just get the ability to make a table. You get the experience of going from not being very good at something to being acceptable at it. Now, you don't need to be capable of being a carpenter, but you've just learned that, hey, if I get my head down and I work at something, I can learn that. Now we've got kids going through these schools where the only thing they teach them is learn this out and write it out in an exam. The only real skills they're learning are arithmetic, reading, and writing. Apart from that, it's mostly learn stuff and write it out in an exam again. So they're not learning that they can learn. And what does the market economy require of you? It requires of you to go out and provide value to other people. When you look at the work that people do in school, it's not meaningful work. You fill in a worksheet and then the teacher marks it and then she puts it in the bin. Or you write an essay and the teacher reads it, gives you a mark and hands it back to you. If you're lucky, your parents read it. They're not saying, write this essay to convince someone of something that you believe, and we'll publish it online or something. People aren't, or you're not learning to make stuff that you then, when you learn to make a table, you also get a table. So the work that we're putting kids through detaches them from the reality of producing something for a purpose. It's all meaningless work.
There is also no real honor in today's society to be able to make something, right? Who's making something? That's your hobby. You do that as an extra. That is not your profession, because you need to have something.
People are coming out not only without skills, but without the experience of discovering that they can learn skills that are useful to other people. They're going to be hostile to the market because they're coming out incapable of providing for themselves in a market economy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I noticed it a little bit from myself, what you're saying. I mean, I came out of college. I was supposed to become auditor. And yeah, you learn while you go, but you had no clue what you were going to do while you hit the office for the first time, right? And I was never taught what a euro is. And that's in the end what made me a radical a little bit, because when I found out myself, I retaliated a little bit. But yeah, so I think it's a good analysis what you're saying. I can see a truth in your answer. Let's say it like that, right?
Great.
What I also would like to know is, what do you think if Marx was alive today? What would he think or say about all this cultural Marxism that's going around? Would he agree or oppose it? Or
that's a really interesting question. Marx is an interesting character. He didn't really engage with his critics. He would kind of flame them. You know, Marx would be terrible on Twitter or Facebook because he really lost his temper with anyone that didn't agree with him. He had some friends that he debated with and he learned from, but he lost them. He almost even lost Engels, who supported him as a friend, because when Engels' wife died, he wrote a letter that didn't really show any compassion for that, and
he wanted more money,
and also asked for money. So the thing is, but it's not that he didn't change any opinions during his lifetime. Over his life, he became much less hopeful that revolution. He believed that revolution was just around the corner. And as things went on, it became clear that it wasn't. He also obviously changed his opinion on the progressive immiseration of the workers, which really, in a way, the ass falls out of his theory, because it's the life of the workers becoming progressively worse, which is meant to drive them to revolution. So if Marx at the end of his life is saying, well, you know, capitalism doesn't really make workers poor in objective terms, only in relative terms, then why are they going to revolt? You know, why are they going to make a communist revolution? So whether he would accept the cultural Marxist, it's impossible. The thing is, it's impossible to divorce Marx from his time. So it's impossible to say what Marx's position would be like today. That's like asking, if Beethoven was born today, what genre of music would he compose? You know, maybe he'd be making electronic music or something like that. Marx, a bunch of rivers flowed into Marx. The previous socialists, most of them French, the American political economists and German philosophy, the time was ripe for Marx to produce his theories, and it's really impossible to divorce Marx from the time that he was writing in. I think that's interesting because it almost gives a defense to a Marxist position, which is
let me also try to be a little bit of a devil's advocate.
Can I just finish?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Sorry. It also kind of gives power to one of Marx's theories, which is that it's economic conditions that shape our ideas rather than ideas that shape economic conditions, because I'm saying that and that, you know, there's a historical conditions give rise to ideas, because I'm saying that his historical conditions were a necessary prerequisite for his ideas.
Yes.
I was triggered to also try and be devil's advocate here a little bit.
Please do.
And because what if a little hypothesis? I mean, let's first of all let me say that I don't believe we live in a true capitalist society today. There is a central bank and governments demand that you pay your taxes in one certain currency. So it's, subsidies everywhere, protection, fees, whatever. But it is still somewhat more capitalist than communist, the system that we're living in. So the thing is that I'm saying is that Marx predicted this revolution. What if he was just really early, and that since 2008 we now see the inflation in traditional government fiat money systems. This, I believe, the number is something like 20% of all dollars that are in existence are created in this year. Because of Corona, there was a massive increase on the balance sheet, for example, of the Federal Reserve Bank, but also the ECB and the Central Bank of Japan saw rise in total balance. The total number of the balance sheet just grew enormously big again. So 20% of all the dollars in circulation are created this year. So what if the revolution is around the corner just now and everything is still going to happen? Because we also see this United Nations Sustainable Development Goal play out, for example. So aren't the pieces falling together?
Well, the thing is, even if revolution happens, and it could, that doesn't mean that Marx is right. Like, right about what? I'm sure a lot of people have hypothesized revolution. When you say Marx is right, what was he right about? Was he right about the fact that societies progress in stages, from feudalism to capitalism to socialism? Will it prove that that a centrally planned economy can work? I mean, it's certainly been tried in several countries. Now lots of people who claim to be Marxists say, oh no, we don't believe in central planning. That's the authoritarian left. We're the libertarian left. We want, we want people to own their own factories and things like that. That still doesn't really solve the calculation problem. So the fact is that Marx was for the abolition of the market, right? So if people are coming along and saying that they've got an updated version of socialism which allows the market to exist, they're not orthodox Marxists. They might have adopted Marx's ideas in some areas, but they're definitely not. If they're for the existence of markets in some socialist society, then they're not orthodox Marxists, that's for sure.
Well, I tried, but
I mean, revolution can happen, but I don't think it'll be a good thing. It's not going to lead to a better. At this stage, it's not going to lead to a better society if it does happen. I
think if it's going to happen, it's going to be partially staged, right? And that's what I just, in the little break we had, it's what I see a little bit happening now. That if these people that have been rioting since July for basically the elections, because that's why it's happening now, and now they are in this mindset because we live in limbo. I made a YouTube video yesterday about it. It's a little crypto term when you send your coins out and they are waiting for confirmation. They are in limbo. So I made the analogy that we are living in limbo today because we are waiting for this presidential outcome. And if it shifts, then I can really see those people who have been basically saying, like, we're going to start a revolution, that something might happen.
You're talking about the Antifa people?
Stuff like that, yeah. So how close could we actually be? That's a little bit my thing. What if Trump wins within 1 month and he is elected again? Will we see all of that happening?
Sorry, could you repeat that? I don't understand. I didn't.
Yeah, well, I'm just,
No, just the last thing. Loud. Just the last thing. Just the last thing that you said.
What if it shifts? What if the election shifts to Trump? Do you see an opportunity for, because because people have been warmed up a little bit for it. So do you think it will explode? You are in the United States today. Is there a lot of hatred already? And if I look at the media, the way how they talk, two sides against each other, it's not really like they're best friends. Let's
No,
say
it's been, and this is the consequence of parliamentary democracy. It's winner takes all. And when you have a situation where 66% or 70% or 80% are on one side and 20% are on the other side, people are willing to accept a lot more. They go, okay, well, I don't agree with it, but it's the consensus. But when you have something like Brexit, which is 52% to 48%, or Scottish independence, which is 55% to 45% against, or the American elections, which the last two have been super close, what you essentially have is whoever wins, takes it all. They get to force their agenda on the other half, and the other half hate them. And the only real solution to this, and unfortunately it's not presented, is to lower the influence that the government has on the day-to-day lives of people, so people don't feel like they're losing everything when they lose an election. At least if we're negotiating and we disagree, we can say, well, we'll have 50% my way and 50% your way, and maybe we can come to an agreement. We can listen to, one of us doesn't like heavy metal and one of us doesn't like pop music, so we can listen to disco or something, find some kind of compromise, something that we both like. This is impossible with parliamentary democracy. And the problem we face is whenever you talk about democracy not being a good thing, or you wanting to have less democracy, people think that the alternative is dictatorship. But in reality, the choice is not usually between democratic control and dictatorial control. It's between democratic control and the market. Democracy, to the degree that democratic control increases, market control decreases, and the inverse is also true.
Yeah. By the way, how was Marx thinking about democracy?
Yeah, okay, so that's a really, really good question, because I actually wrote an essay about this. I don't know if it's on Mises or not. But yeah, people can look on Mises.org and search my name and Marx. But I was definitely writing about it. It's hard to get a exact idea of what Marx thought about democracy, because he was mostly writing against. Most of Marx's works were polemical. He'd take what someone else said and say, this is why what they said was wrong. And because the liberals, the pro-capitalists of his time, were his main enemies, he would emphasize the shortcomings of democracy as far as he saw it. But, however, in other places, he was praising democracy. He praised America for being more democratic than Germany. On the whole, parliamentary democracy was seen as sort of a bourgeois liberal thing, not radical enough for Marx, but was maybe a step in the right direction. So you can see, quotes not that far from what libertarians might say, like, democracy is one means of deciding once in every 3 or 6 years which member of the ruling class was to misrepresent the people in parliament. Things that progressives say today, like, oh, it's not a real democracy, it's just, you get to vote every 3 to 6 years.
Johan always likes to say it's the dictatorship of the majority.
Well, it is the dictatorship of the majority, but Marx was, in a sense, for the dictatorship of the democracy of the majority. The dictatorship of the majority would not necessarily have been something that he was against. So So it's difficult to extract a clear view because he never sat down and wrote, here is my opinion on democracy. So in some places you can find quotes that are favorable to democracy, and some quotes you can find him hostile to democracy.
I remember there is one article Marx wrote for the newspaper he was an editor in, Rhinelander Zeitung or something. What was this newspaper he was working for?
Oh, I don't remember.
Okay, I think it was like a Rhinelander Zeitung or something. He wrote this article that was at the moment, it was in 1884, when the Workers' Party was kicked out of the parliament. And he wrote this article that we should not pay taxes because we are not represented. So that's actually very funny that you have Marx claiming we should not pay taxes because we are not represented. You remember that article?
Who said we shouldn't pay taxes because we were not represented?
Karl Marx.
All right, that's quite funny. I know I've not seen that article before.
I can look it up for you. It's very funny. He was very angry because the Communist Party was kicked out of the German parliament. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, but I mean, but in any choice, whenever a revolutionary government took place that was against the majority, if they were socialists, in his lifetime, Marx favored them. So there were, like, you know, the Civil War in France has tribute to the Paris Commune. You know, that was basically the situation of a minority of radicals taking over the government, and there was little uprisings like this throughout his lifetime, and he supported them. You know, so basically he supported democracy when he thought it furthered his aims. But if a small group of radical socialist revolutionaries usurped a regime, even if it had been established by the overwhelming majority of the people in that region, he would still favor the radical communists taking over the majority.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which means that in a way he was the forerunner of Lenin, you know, who, I mean, obviously Lenin was a Marxist, but Lenin doctored Marx slightly because he had to give a justification for why communist revolution happened in agrarian Russia rather than an industrialized country. And he said, well, what we need is a vanguard. We need a vanguard who are the most class-conscious people to lead the revolution because the masses are not ready for revolution yet. So what we need, so the revolution doesn't necessarily come from the bottom up. You know, we need the most advanced socialists who have the class consciousness to lead the revolution.
How much does I asked this question because a lot of if you libertarians have a discussion with a communist, we always take the example of all those countries that were socialist or communist, and we say, well, it didn't work out. Look at the Soviet Union. And then the communists always answer that was not real communism.
Yes, they always do that.
Yeah. But how much does it actually what are the differences between what Marx was looking sorry, I can't get the right English word. How much is the difference between what Marx had in mind and the Soviet Union as we know it?
Well, the thing is, Marx in his demeanor was kind of dictatorial. So, in a sense, the regimes take after Marx's character. rather than what he said. While he may have explicitly advocated the idea of democratic workers' government, his own personal style was dictatorial and intolerant. So what could be said is none of these countries completely abolished the market, but it's impossible to abolish the market because people are trading by nature. Even in prison camps, people trade cigarettes. As soon as people get
more than that.
I don't know anything about that. I have no idea.
As soon as people are, in internment camps and they're given their Red Cross packages, they open them up and find out what they can trade with one another. So the markets you can repress markets, but they will always exist somehow. I guess Marx thought that communism would be so super abundant that people would just go and help themselves to the bounteous largesse that had been created by getting rid of the capitalists. But also he thought that people would just work voluntarily on whatever work pleased them. So the more you look at what he thought would happen, the more it seems a little bit cuckoo. And you're amazed that people could have believed this at the time, and a little bit more amazed that people can believe it now. But I mean, people just don't really understand how markets work. To be honest, they don't understand how the market really drives efficiency.
Amen to that.
They think that markets are wasteful or something like that, when actually it's only the profit motive that drives companies to innovate and find ways to make fewer resources stretch further.
Yeah. True. Yeah. Well, is there also a big difference in between the Soviet Union under Lenin and the Soviet Union under Stalin and then Khrushchev and Brezhnev? Is there?
I don't. I'm not an expert in the history of Russia. I think it's amazing that a person could have as much power as any of these leaders had and exert so much of an influence upon society that you can't help but think that, of course there would have been differences between them. I think the lesson of Russia is exactly what Mises predicted would happen in 1920 is exactly what happened. I mean, if you just give me a second here, I'll give you some examples. Marx basically said that in the absence of a market economy, that you couldn't allocate production properly, and there would be wasteful production, but there would also be shortages. So despite having a lot of arable land, the USSR suffered famines. And we were told that only 3% of the land which was actually privatized was responsible for 30% of the food production of the entire country. I've heard varying figures on that. Some people say 4% produced 25%, and so that's a little bit confusing, but it has appeared in various credible sources. So you saw these exact things happen where people were starving, but there was grain in the fields, and there was tractors that were rusty because they didn't have enough diesel to fuel the tractors, but they were making more tractors. When they made lots and lots of women's clothing in large sizes because they were the targets were set for the yards. So they said we need X amounts of yards of clothing, and the easiest way to produce them was to just make very big clothes. And then houses were built with no roofs because the government demanded nails by the ton. So the easiest way to make the quotas was to produce large nails, and they were too big for the job. So it's really interesting that exactly what Mises predicted would happen in the absence of Marxists is what happened in the Soviet Union.
Yeah. If you look at the Soviet Union, it's a real disaster. It's surprising that it took 70 years to collapse. Huh?
Yeah, the thing is, it didn't just collapse. The Soviet Union was subject to famines a few times, and what happens is that the Europeans and the Americans gave them food aid. Now, it might seem like pretty a horrible thing to go, well, just let those people starve to death. But the thing is, the regime could not have survived outside intervention, such as those where we came in and brought food aid. And well, I say we, I hate that because we weren't born. The other thing is, all the tech, like the Soviet economy was non-innovative. They were getting technology from Europe and America. John D. Rockefeller, owner of Standard Oil, furnished the Soviet regime with, West technology that was built, it was developed in the West in exchange for access to the Soviet oil fields. So, the Soviet Union sent food out of the USSR to European countries in exchange for European technology. So the reason why it survived is because it was dependent on the West, the same way that the reason why the state survives in Western institutions is because it's parasitic upon the private sector.
Yet there's also this famine in Ukraine. They were producing most of the grain, and they gave it away to Nazi Germany, which became their later enemy.
Right, yeah.
Second World War, yeah. And so all these people, they were working in the fields, but they were not allowed to eat the food they produced.
And what happened? They starved, and then they stopped producing food in many occasions because they knew they weren't even working for themselves. Someone was going to come along and take it away.
Yoshi, you have a question?
I think I'm a little bit, I can tell you I am awake now for 25 hours today.
So, okay.
And that's because I sleep quite a bit irregular lately. I don't know. I don't have an agenda, so it's okay. Don't worry about it. But I have asked a couple of questions. I did learn a lot from this conversation. Maybe we should ask Antony about, if he is interested in the 3rd of January, when we plan a Bitcoin special.
Well, we have a lot of guests.
We have a lot of guests. Okay, sorry. So,
but if you're interested,
I'm the wrong person to ask anyway. My knowledge of Bitcoin is pretty limited.
Okay, well, in that case, if you want to learn more, we now have contact on Skype, so you can always write me and shoot me a message, and I will gladly explain you whatever you want to know. So that is a little gesture back, maybe.
Before we end, I want to also ask some little bit more about the subject of cultural Marxism. Can you describe for people who are not familiar with it how you can recognize this nowadays? What it is? You already mentioned identity politics, but are there more?
It's any. I would say I consider cultural Marxism. Now, someone might come along and take a different view or correct me here, to be any cultural attack on capitalism. For example, I kind of see the environmentalist movement as it exists in Western countries as cultural Marxism. Now, I'm an environmentalist. I have a very popular podcast called "Only Capitalism Can Save the Planet. Socialism Will Destroy the Earth," that did very well on YouTube and on SoundCloud. But the thing is, this environmental movement, like you can see people like the British journalist called George Monbiot, are using environmental issues as an attack on capitalism itself, when actually those socialist nations did far worse at taking care of the environment than the West
trying today.
And people don't know this. People don't know how bad the environment was in countries like Czechoslovakia, Poland, and the Soviet Union. Now, so what happened was the old left believed that because when you kicked out the capitalists, because they were skimming their profits off the top, and labor was the real originator of wealth, of value, that once you got rid of the capitalists, society would become rich, everyone would be richer. That was proven wrong by all of the experiments in communism. So they could stop saying, will be much richer and more productive under socialism and communism, they had to start saying, well, being productive is bad. Economic growth is destroying the planet. Consumerism makes people very materialistic. People are too materialistic in capitalist societies, and that's because they live in a capitalist economy. They won't be so materialistic under our communist utopia. All of these sociological attacks on capitalism, saying that capitalism is bad for the heart and soul of man, I would say those kinds of things are cultural Marxism. It does exist in Marx. Marx thought that capitalism was sociologically damaging, not just economically bad, but that the worker, by performing a repetitive task in a factory, was turned into a cog in a machine, you know. And definitely the cultural Marxists took that analysis further, took his idea of commodity fetishism further, and started making all sorts of cultural and sociological attacks on capitalism. So all of that to me is cultural Marxism.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, thanks very much for your time. Can you also, if people want to know more about you, where can they find you?
Yeah,
you already mentioned your podcast.
Yeah, you can check out Scottish Liberty Podcast. You can type Antony Sammeroff into Mises.org and find a bunch of my articles, including 4 articles on Marx, which are excerpts from a book I'm writing at the moment on Marx and Mises. So I hope to continue with that. And tune into Scottish Liberty Podcast. I've got, if you want to know which episodes I recommend, send me a little message on Facebook, and I'll send you some of my favorite episodes, because we've got about 170 episodes. So some people don't know where to start.
Yeah.
I can say that I will share the link one extra time in the chat. I have also announced your Mises profile to my followers, and I have been spreading that link. Let me try. There's something not happening, but I'm gonna write this in the chat somehow so that it's in screen. Wait a second.
Okay, I will also post it on our website where the video is posted, and
once it's posted, let me know, and I'll syndicate it out as an episode of Scottish Liberty Podcast as well.
Okay, thank you very much. It was great talking with you, and wish you good luck. This is the end of our podcast, and we will be back next week, and on January 3rd we have the Bitcoin birthday party together with the Dutch Libertarian Party. We keep you all up to date, and I wish everybody a free and independent week, and we see you next week. Bye bye.